Here at IPC seminar series, we will have Charlotte below speaking about care work in public work program in South Africa. Charlotte has a bachelor's degree in political science at the University of Maastricht and a master's degree in the University of Sussex, is it in Brighton? I would like to ask you if you have minor passions that are an obstacle for your understanding. Please feel free to ask her immediately, but save the last questions for the end of her presentation, okay, if possible. On the 30th of June, we will have here Ivan Thiago from PEA that will present a seminar on non-tariff barriers to trade, okay? So we hope to see you again on the end of June. And please, Charlotte, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, today I'll be presenting my master's thesis that I wrote last year at the Institute of Development Studies, IDS, in the UK. So I wrote my thesis about the expanded public works program in South Africa, and I looked particularly at the meaning of the program for the recognition of unpaid care work. And yeah, just first of all, a short overview of what I'll be presenting today. I thought it would be good to start with some background information that I think are important in order to understand the program and the context in South Africa. Then the expanded public works program, a few words on that, before I'll explain the framework that I used, and then finally coming to my main analysis. And yeah, as Lucy and Hika said, if you have any questions at the end or contributions, thoughts in general, I'll be happy to hear them. Starting with some facts on care work, which most of you might already know, or maybe some things you don't know yet, but yeah, all around the world, care work and domestic work, care work referring to taking care of children, of the elderly, of the sick or disabled, is usually under or unpaid and falls predominantly on women. So this is a universal phenomenon, and in recent years there have been a couple of so-called time use surveys conducted that measure the amount of hours spent by men and women respectively on care and domestic work. In South Africa, this study found in, I think it was 2010, that unemployed women spend on average 4 hours and 20 minutes per day on domestic and care work, compared to men who spend, to check it, I think it was 1.5 hours. And, oh, sorry, 2.5 hours. And interestingly, with employment, this the time spent on care work decreases, but this gender disparity remains. So women still spend more time on care work than men. And yeah, as I said, this is almost universal around the world, but I think it's important to highlight also that there's a clear class dimension to it. So families, wealthier families, can of course afford someone to take care of their children, or they can afford equipment, which can save a lot of time. Whereas in poorer settings, yeah, women often do not have these possibilities. And yeah, despite its importance, the importance of care work for human well-being and for the reproductive economy, care work often tends to be ignored in economic models and in public policies. And this is quite alarming, especially in poorer settings where gender equalities are linked to other, or where, sorry, not recognizing unpaid care work is often linked to other gender inequalities, such as access to education or employment opportunities. And this is why Diane Alson, she suggested, or she came up with the RRR framework, which refers to recognition, reduction, and redistribution. So first of all, a recognition of unpaid care work, then a reduction in terms of the drudgery associated with it, with it, and then redistribution, meaning redistribution among men and women within the household, but also among or between the household and the state level. Yeah, so far on care work and unpaid care work. Now, a few facts on the South African context, which I think are essential to understand the public works program. So since the end of the apartheid regime, so the official racial segregation regime, poverty levels have declined. However, they remain high, and inequality remains extremely high. So South Africa is known to be, depends a bit on the ranking, but the most or second most unequal country in the world, with a Gini coefficient of 0.63. 45% live under the national poverty line, which is equal to, I think, 23 million people. And 20% live below the extreme poverty line. So, as I said, there was a reduction in poverty, which has partially can be attributed to the quite expensive or quite very extensive social protection system in South Africa. So in 2013, for example, 1/3 of the population benefited from some form of social grant, compared to only 2.5 million in 1998. So there was quite a significant expansion. However, most of these grants, they usually target particularly vulnerable groups, such as the disabled, orphans, or the elderly. And they do not tackle, or they do not target what's called the working poor, so men and women of working age. This, however, given that South Africa suffers from structural unemployment for over 25 years now, since 2000, the unemployment rate has averaged around 25%. And looking at the distribution among the population groups in South Africa, it becomes clear that Black Africans are particularly affected by unemployment, as this little table here shows. And women, more women than men also suffer or are affected by unemployment. And so for unemployment, which I think is relevant to understand the public works program, which has also the aim of combating unemployment. Another important background information is the AIDS crisis in the country. So in 2015, about 7 million people were living with HIV. And South Africa has one of the highest prevalence rates in the world, with about 19% of the population being infected by HIV. And here, so in recent years, there's been more emphasis has been put on the rollout of antiretroviral therapies, but from a caretaker perspective, one can criticize that less attention has been given or has been paid to those actually taking care of people with HIV/AIDS. And here, this burden of care falls increasingly on women due to socialized gender norms that attribute care work as women's natural work. In the South African context, the concept of home and community-based care, which is the topic of my presentation today, is very important. So home and community-based care refers to primary health and social services provided at the community level by so-called community health workers. And these community health workers are usually trained and managed by community-based NGOs. Most of them are female, and most of them work as volunteers. So sometimes they receive a little stipend, or sometimes they receive some form of in-kind payment, but they're not full-time employees. In the South African context, home and community-based care, the importance of home and community-based care can also be explained a bit by by historical factors. So often the national programs, national AIDS programs, took more time to be rolled out on a national level and often to reach, for example, rural areas. And civil society organizations were often quicker to respond, which explains a bit this, how these home and community-based care organizations emerged in the first place. And So over time, home and community-based care has been integrated more systematically into the policy framework, and more resources have been made available. And the Expanded Public Works Program is one example of this systemization of home and community-based care. So before talking about the Expanded Public Works Program in more detail, just a few words on public works programs in general. So as you might know, public works programs are a labor market policy that provide temporary jobs to the unemployed. And usually these jobs are provided in labor-intensive sectors, such as the infrastructure sector. And the wages paid in public works programs are usually below the market standard, so that they don't compete with the formal labor market, and that really only those that are really in need of this program participate in the program. Public works programs are especially popular in low and middle income countries because they're often referred to as a win-win policy, because on the one hand, they combat unemployment and poverty, or this is at least the long-term aim, because they provide people with work experience, and the idea is that then after participating in this program, they have better chances on the formal labor market. And on the other hand, they create public goods, such as roads often, or sometimes community centers. Public works programs have been criticized for a couple of reasons, including their effectiveness in terms of poverty reduction, but also with regard to the quality of the goods that they produce. So often, for example, roads were of low quality. But I won't go more into detail here, because what's more important for my presentation today and for the research that I did is that from a gender perspective, public works programs can be criticized because they are not, or often not, gender sensitive, meaning that either they offer work that is physically or culturally not appropriate for women, and more importantly, they do not take women's care responsibilities into account. So often women can't participate in these programs because of their care responsibilities at home. And this is now where the South African Expanded Public Works Program becomes interesting. The Expanded Public Works Program was introduced in 2004, offering temporary jobs and trainings in 4 different areas: in the infrastructure, the economic, the third one was the environment and culture sector, and the fourth one, which is the one I looked at, is the social sector. And the aim of the program was, and still is, it's still in place, to draw the unemployed into productive work by providing them with work opportunities and skills. In 2014, the program went into its 3rd phase, and the aim is now to create up to 6 million work opportunities by 2019. In the social sector, there were originally 2 programs, or 2 sub-programs, wants to call it like that. One is early childhood development, and the other one is home and community-based care. And I concentrated on home and community-based care and its meaning for the recognition of unpaid care work. So the social sector is interesting from a gender perspective, because one could describe it or classify it as a gender-sensitive public works program, because on the one hand, it offers work opportunities in an area that is already predominantly occupied by women, so in the care sector, and thus providing them with a basic income, because often these women otherwise work unpaid or as volunteers. And on the other hand, they also recognize the high care need in South Africa, so the need for primary health and social services. And that's what made me interested in the program, and I looked into the social sector in a bit more detail. And I would say, unfortunately, there are a couple of challenges with the social sector program. So this pie chart here, for example, shows the budget allocation, the initial budget allocation in billion rands. And the orange part is the budget allocation for the infrastructure sector, which was and still is the biggest sector. And the brownish purple part, the smallest one, is the budget allocation for the social sector. So we can already see a very big difference here. And then interestingly, in terms of the wages paid, so the EPWP, they measure in daily wages, we can see a very striking difference. So in the infrastructure sector, in 2014-15, the daily average wage was 128 rands, which is more or less equal to $9 US. And in the social sector, it was 75. And that was the lowest paid. It improved, as you can see, over time. So in the first year of the program, this was significantly lower. And then the second phase, actually, minimum daily wage of 70, I think, rands was introduced. So you can see in 2014, in the social sector, the daily wage is just above this minimum wage. Then some other challenges, problems with the program of the social sector program is that the idea was that trainings are offered on a quite regular basis so that people really become more qualified for the formal labor market. However, often this didn't happen, or training opportunities were not offered to the extent that were supposed to be offered. And so limiting the participants' chances to really enter into the formal labor market or to become more qualified for the formal labor market. Moreover, the work conditions were found to be often quite precarious in terms of, in the sense that participants often worked extra hours, and the community-based organizations, they're supposed to contribute to the unemployment insurance fund, but this often didn't happen. And then adding to this, in 2012, the expenditure for the program, for the social sector program, also dropped, as you can see here, from 2.2 to 1.4 billion rand. And so this is where I realized that actually, in terms of recognizing and valorizing unpaid care work or care work in general, the program just seemed to have several challenges. And this is where I started to ask myself, so how come that a seemingly gender-sensitive social protection program is not quite what one would hope it to be? And this is where I came across Bina Fernandez's policy framework. So Bina Fernandez, she in her research, she takes the example of an Indian poverty reduction program, which is meant to offer self-employment opportunities to women. And she looks at it and tries to find out, okay, why did this program fail? And the reason why she does that is that normally impact evaluations, they would say it was a lack of political will or missing capacities. And she said she wanted to go beyond this design implementation dichotomy, which is often actually not looking at the root problem or the root explanation of why these programs, especially for women, often fail. And so what she suggests is, or what she says, that every poverty reduction policy is embedded within a broader policy consensus. And this is the term she uses. And this policy consensus is based on certain assumptions. And however, often these assumptions do not correspond with women's reality on the ground. And to understand these assumptions, she suggests to analyze the narratives and the policy representations within a given law or within a given policy. And because she says these policy representations, which can also be called keywords or labels, they often have a normative function. So they prescribe a certain behavior or an expected outcome. An example of this would be, for example, empowering or self-reliant communities. So they already imply a certain expected outcome. This is now just really a short version of the framework. But that's the framework I followed. And from this, I developed the following research question, which is what narratives shape the inclusion of home and community-based care within the expanded public works program. And more importantly, what does the program reveal about the valuing of unpaid care work? So what I did is I looked at the major development plans after the end of apartheid, so after 1994, but also at some political speeches and party resolutions, so the main national policy documents. And I wanted to understand the narratives around the causes of and proposed solutions to poverty, unemployment, also the narratives around public works programs and around care work. And today I'll be presenting on the care narratives, as I call them, because we don't have enough time to go through all of them. The programs, some examples of the policy programs that I looked at is the Reconstructive Development Program, which was the first national development program implemented by the ANC in 1994. And another important policy document is the White Paper for Social Welfare from 1997. And so now coming to the narratives around care work that I wanted to understand in order to maybe get a better idea of, or how could these narratives help to explain the failures of the program or the challenges of the program. And when looking at these documents, one can clearly see that the women's care burden was acknowledged. So, for example, I put two example quotes here. The first one, women take responsibility for all aspects of their family's life. And the second one, women are the key providers of unacknowledged social care to the sick, to the physically and mentally disabled, the young and the elderly. So one can see that care work, unpaid care work, and the importance of care work was recognized. And this is also, for this, it's also important to know a bit of the historical context, because during the apartheid regime, laws around labor, but also mobility, they were also gendered. So, for example, men often worked as migrant workers, whereas women stayed in their communities and often were the heads of households, actually, because the male members of the household worked in other cities. And so because they were the heads of households and many men were often not present in the communities anymore, they provided not only important care and social services at the household level, but also at the community level. And so the first policy programs, they tried to address this hardship faced by women. And it is, for example, recognized that there's insufficient allocation to childcare services. However, in terms of concrete policy commitments, it remains rather vague and limited. And moreover, men are not mentioned with regard to the provision of care, thus reinforcing this traditional gendered idea of division between productive male and reproductive female work. Then, when looking at the concept of family in relation to care in these documents, it becomes clear that the family is referred to as the basic unit of society, the core of the social support system. And family-based care is often prioritized, or at least portrayed, as something more desirable than institutionalized care. And for example, elderly care is often portrayed as something that should be done by families, ideally. And there are very good reasons for this, which I won't go into detail here now into this debate. But what is important is that it's not acknowledged who's a family, who actually provides this care. So kind of a gender-blind idea of family-based care. So care work is recognized, but it remains a private matter, reinforcing the idea that caregiving is a natural work of women that does not require much learning. And these narratives help to understand, this is what I argued also, why the wages in the social sector, for example, were so low, lower than in other programs. A bit on the role of communities and on their role in providing care. So community organizations they've always played a very important role in the provision of welfare social services at the community level. Yeah, especially during the apartheid regime, where services were very limited and basically only available for the white population. And one can see that terms such as self-reliant communities, community pride, or community-based development are used quite frequently in the policy documents. And this also becomes clear when looking at the narrative, the discourse around public works programs. They are also described as something for the communities because people participating in public works programs, they contribute to the communities and in a bigger sense to the national development. And this is often put in contrast to social grants, for example, that have more this connotation of being dependent, of social assistance. So yeah, this idea of community-based development and self-reliant is also reflected in the expanded public works program. But here again, this emphasis on communities, what is not really acknowledged here is that it's often women who provide services at the community level. Yeah, so again, a bit gender blind, let's say. And when it comes to care, specifically provided by care, as I explained earlier, the idea of home and community-based care has been around for a long time as a fixed term in the policy language. And this can be traced back to the 1980s, where scholars observed a shift from more curative to more developmental community-based care. And here it's also important to know that in times of the AIDS, HIV crisis, home and community-based care is also a very cost-efficient solution to the epidemic. And so much is expected of community organizations in terms of care provision, in terms of service provision. However, they face very serious challenges in terms of funding. I argued in my dissertation that through the expanded public works program, home and community-based care is also consolidated, and it mirrors this understanding that communities are in charge of providing essential primary care services. And so what we can observe is a shift in the care regime. So the idea of the care regime refers to who in the society provides care services. And as I said, through the public works program, home and community-based care is further consolidated as a permanent feature of South Africa's care regime. And although there's some sort of upgrading, there are more funds made available to these community organizations, even with the public works program, they still remain heavily underfunded. And thus, I argue it will be very difficult to achieve good quality care for everyone and to improve care work as a profession. And this rather gender-blind relegation of care work to communities illustrates the shift away from the state's responsibility to provide universal care and adequate pay to care workers. And yeah, this, as I said earlier, is also can be observed in the expanded public works program, where the wages for the care workers are the lowest. The budget allocation is lower than for other sectors or for other programs. And to illustrate this shift in the care regime, I find the care diamond by Razavi quite useful. So according to her, care is always provided by multiple entities. Can be provided by the families, like the household, the market, so for profit, the non-profit, which includes community organizations, or the state. And care will always be provided by a mix of these institutions. But what can be observed in South Africa, that through the public works program, more emphasis is put on the non-profit sector, so there's kind of a shift to that side. And think this is, yeah, basically these are the main ideas that I developed or that in my dissertation. So already coming to the conclusion, I found that the expanded public works program does help to recognize care work as a service and as a provision that needs to be strengthened. However, the program reinforces the idea that care is provided by women at the community level. And the rhetoric of self-reliant communities, which is also found with regard to the public works program, but also to care in more general, hides the gender dimension of communities and of care work. And care work remains undervalued compared to other professions. So other professions such as, for example, in the infrastructure that usually involve heavy machines, they are often valued more, not only in society, but also in monetary, in a monetary sense. And however, for a social protection program, which is meant to reach the poorest segments of society, and in this case, especially women, it remains crucial that they're designed in a more gender or care-sensitive way, because as I explained in the beginning, not recognizing care responsibilities or not valuing care sufficiently is linked to a lot of other gender inequalities. And these affect every woman, but particularly women in poorer settings. And so yeah, maybe as a takeaway message, care work is central to human development, and this is usually also acknowledged. But it's also part of citizenship rights and state obligations. The state has an obligation to provide good quality care that is affordable or accessible by anyone. And yeah, care should not only be portrayed or emphasized and reinforced as something that is provided by families, and especially women. And yeah, I'd like to end with a quote by John Tronto, who wrote on the ethics of care, which I quite liked. And yeah, that's it. If you have some references in case you're interested. And if you have any questions or contributions in general, your thoughts, happy to hear them.
So please, if you have any questions. Got one there.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. So I have a question. Because I think it's very interesting when it comes to gender stereotypes and gender relations and roles, how it can become very cyclical between the state's role and the population's role in reiterating the gender divisions and barriers. And I was wondering, in your opinion, whether you think the public work program, if you put more emphasis or more money onto the social side of things, the social sector, that would be helpful in changing this gender dynamics, or do you think that would be too much of a top-down approach? Would it require more bottom-up, population approach?
Yeah, I think more resources are definitely necessary, but I think it's important to keep in mind that, of course, a public works program can't change gender roles that are very deeply embedded in society. So a public works program alone won't do this redistribution of care work. This, I think, takes a lot more time and more efforts. But I think valuing and paying care work adequately definitely helps to valorize it. But another approach could also be to incentivize, for example, men to participate more in the social sector program. But here again, of course, this I acknowledge would be quite top-down, so there needs to be a bit more bottom-up and yeah, change in society in general, which takes decades, that's clear. But I think what's the case of the South African program is interesting because they try to be more gender sensitive, but one can still see that these really deeply entrenched gender norms that you can see even in bigger policy documents, national development plans, they're really difficult to change, and they're reflected even in a seemingly or supposedly gender-sensitive program.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Congratulations. I was just wondering about when you think about care work, mainly on caring for the children.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are growing, have the issue of the aging of the population. Do you find something about that in South Africa? Are they concerned about how to care for the elderly, and the EPWP also addresses kind of questions? It's already addressing.
Yeah, so the home and community-based care can also be, it includes a variety of tasks and depends a lot on the organization, so it's really on the community level. But they can include also taking care of the elderly. And I think in the South African context, yeah, there are a lot of households that need or that make use of home and community-based care workers, not only elderly people, but also, for example, orphans that lost one of their parents due to the AIDS crisis, which was also, yeah, very common. But I think, yeah, some of these programs, so as I said, depends a lot on the organizations, but they also take elderly care into account.
Can I just share, like, I don't know, a view, a very like amateur view, like about it. In some shared experiences, and I've actually seen that working as like in a care, performing a care function, actually empowers people a lot within their communities. Like they're seen as they access to a lot of social grants. So I don't know, this contrasts a little bit to this de-empowering. Social word for that, for this weakening perspective with which care worker is often framed. But I wonder if it wouldn't be interesting also to look from the other side, including because I've never gained access to like gender distribution of care workers, but through field experiences meeting with 40 care workers in communities several times, I've actually seen the opposite in many other countries. There's like men dominating those positions, and I even heard complaints from women's associations that they actually wanted this instrument of local power. I don't know what this even means, but it was like
no, I didn't present this today, but it is also part of my thesis, although it's not the main point of analysis. But there have been studies conducted on looking how these community health care sector organizations can be a space of empowerment for women, where women meet, especially also because they're more informal. So sometimes it can provide space for women to group together, to build alliances, and that might not be possible in the household or not even in a regulated job. And I do think it can be a space for empowerment, but when looking at the meaning of, or to what extent care work is recognized through this, I think as long as the wages remain as low as the public works program also reflects it, it will be very difficult. And I think, women's empowerment has to happen. It happens in a lot of spheres. So this can be one, but I think by this low valorization of care work, which is predominantly done by women, this might counteract this a bit.
It's a huge difference between daily average wages in the infrastructure sector and the social sector. Are these differences set by law, or is there anything else that has an influence on these average values?
So the program now has a minimum daily wage, which is 70. But what happens is that the fund comes from the Department of Public Works, from the government, and is redistributed to provinces, which then allocated to the different community organizations. So the payment actually happens really at the community level, and it's not controlled by the state. And this is where these disparities, I think, emerge, because every every public works site, so to say, they can, well, the organization, they decide how much they pay. There's this daily average pay, and there is a recommendation of how much should be paid. But yeah, there's no, this is not set except for this minimum wage.
And what you just said about the funds that are for the wages, does all the fund goes to the payment of the care for when I'm studying, or does it also goes, for example, for education and schoolings and maybe some type of community, so they can go and take and put it like a community for the children and take the children so they can have more time to do other type of works and not only specialize on the care working as we were talking, or is it just the funds go to like a salary, like a wage?
No, not only to, it doesn't only go to the wages. So for example, it also includes training, which so they have professional trainers that also have to be paid. And it depends a lot on the sector, but in the home and community-based care sector, they're also so-called, and the infrastructure sector as well, there are some, I think it's called incentive grants. So if sites do very well, they can get an extra grant. And the idea is that they employ more people. But in the case of home and community-based care, this can also be, I think, can also be used for the site itself. So it doesn't necessarily have to go directly to the wages.
Could you describe a little bit about the care work? Where is it provided? Are the participants paid to provide care for their own family members or other families, or is it provided at a community center? Mm-hmm. Could you describe a little bit?
Yeah. Sorry, I think I forgot that a bit on that slide. So home and community-based care, it can take, there's several tasks that are included. It can mean really providing primary health services to people infected with HIV, but it can also include more social services, such as linking people to other poverty reduction programs on the community level or municipality level. But it can also mean going to someone's place, that's why home-based, community-based, and providing very basic nursing care. And so it depends a lot on the organizations which kind of home community-based care they provide, but it includes a variety of tasks. And there are also community-based centers where health and social services are provided.
One more question. You said that community care has a relevant role in South Africa since the 1980s, if I understood it correctly. And since 2004, it's part of the programs. My question is, probably it's the very idea of home and community-based care is better implemented and better funded now than it was in the 80s. The problem, my question is, can you see any progress right now, or your opinion is that it has stopped in sufficient level?
Yeah, I think it depends a bit. So because home and
just for my idea is that probably we always complain that a sector isn't funded or something like that, but it's relevant when we can see current progress, because we can say, okay, it's not sufficient now, but in the near future we can perceive that it's going to be better. But if you can't see any progress in current time, so it's a bit dramatic.
No, I think you can see a progress over time, especially when home and community-based care really became part of the national response to the AIDS epidemic. Then more resources were also made available. But at the same time, home and community-based care organizations are growing. So in general, the pictures, it's a bit difficult to say how many of home and community-based care organizations there are. But there were 2 audits conducted, I think one in 2003 and another one in 2009. And they found about 2,000 home and community-based care all over the country. that vary a lot in size and in terms of the services they offer, but they're all grouped under this term. So I think there probably has been an improvement in terms of the resources made available for these organizations. And importantly, these organizations, most of them do receive some government funding, not only through the public works program, but also through other funds from the Department of Health or Department of Welfare. But a lot of them also rely on donors. So it's often a mixture. Donors, sometimes even international donors. So yeah, it's not only the government budget allocated to these organizations, but also private donations, for example.
So my question is, as you said, this program seems to be the national program. I was here wondering whether this seems to be more, I wouldn't even say effective, but more extensive in rural areas or urban areas. So I just wanted to know if you cross over the literature of this difference, or if the program seems to be structured the same for both. But I wanted to know if those community centers are more common in rural or urban areas, or is it the same?
So I remember reading that although community-based care organizations are even present on the lowest, like local or most rural areas, however, the ones participating in the programs, they tend to be, and the more organized ones, they tend to be concentrated in urban areas. I remember reading that. And there was one study that actually criticized that actually the most vulnerable, the poorest, are not reached then through this program. Yeah. I don't have concrete numbers, but this is what I remember.
Do you see any relation between the end of apartheid and the path of care works?
Sorry,
Do you see any relation between the end of apartheid and the path of care works?
So you mean care work as a profession or?
No, as a public policy.
Yes, I think because during the apartheid regime, a lot of care services were provided but the state services were only available to the white population, usually. And community organizations also provided care services, also for the white population. Especially, I remember Christian organizations were very, strongly organized. But also, of course, for the black population, they played a very important role, community-based or more informal organizations. So I would say after the change, after the whole social welfare service became what's called deracialized and was made available for the black population, they can definitely see a change in terms of access to care, childcare. Yeah. Because it was basically not available before on a state level, on a more institutionalized level.
And is there any reflection at the government level about working with NGOs? Because for me, it's a bit crazy to have a national policy based on NGOs. It should be based on institutions and
So the NGOs are especially in the social sector component of the public works program. So the infrastructure sector, they don't work with community-based organizations. But in general, this idea of working with the nonprofit sector is, I would say, quite prevalent in South Africa. Because also, and then going back to the end of apartheid, during the Mandela government, the first big development plan made this clear as well, that South Africa's development should be a conjuncture between the government, so the state, private sector, but also the community. So this idea, I think this idea of community-based development also reflects that. And NGOs, I think, play a very big role in not only in care services, but specifically for the provision of care services. And especially for the provision of care services to people with HIV, because often public hospitals are either they're overburdened, right? So this shift to more community and primary care provided by communities is also intentional to kind of alleviate a bit the burden on the hospitals.
And what's your take on whether, like, improving the benefit for care workers within the public works program is the best way to go, as opposed to building up a career of social work? Many countries it makes sense, let's adapt to the voluntary gift to volunteers or to beneficiaries of working programs. But I don't know, I think South Africa has a more well-established state capacity, and maybe the next goal should be actually building up a social systems career.
Yeah, this is, I mean, some scholars, especially from a gender or care perspective, they actually say this public works program and trying to integrating the care sector into a public works program, which still pays less than the normal labor market, is actually wrong. It should be the care sector, really as a professional, the system should be strengthened from the start. Yeah, I guess the government would then argue, okay, where budgets are not, or funding is not available for that, so this often is, the public works program, I think, can be maybe considered as a step into the right direction, but I agree, I think it should definitely, the public system should be strengthened and improved in the first place.
Is there any training for this people who's going to work the public works to engage in care?
Yeah, actually I have one slide that I think is hidden. I don't know if it's possible to show. It's in the very last. Can you go to the PowerPoint? Maybe? Yes, so if you go all the way down.
It's right there, it's right there.
The very last, yeah. So this one is how it was planned at the beginning. It shows that it's hidden. So I think, yeah. This is the idea how people, so you see that the first level, the work opportunity is what's offered through the public works program. And then here, this file, this arrow, continued training are the training opportunities. And the idea is that one can actually go through different training stages within the program, but the emphasis is put on these exit opportunities. So here, after this first level, people are ideally trained as nurse aides or home community-based care posts. And then they should be able to find, ideally, a job because they're already more qualified. Or they can continue training. But the numbers of trainings are also limited, so not everyone can continue. And here, this stage is the most advanced, the highest stage, which includes social worker or youth care workers. So this was the original plan, but as I mentioned earlier, often this didn't happen. So training opportunities were either not available or they were not executed in the way they were supposed to be, how they were planned. But yeah.
Who provides the training?
The training is provided by special trainers that are, so for each of these learnerships, for example, there's a set curriculum and people gain a qualification actually if they get through this to this learnership. And yeah, the trainings are supposed to be provided by, I think, accredited trainers.
Their basic basket of services, some sort of like standardization of what is expected from those care workers, or it's more ad hoc?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the organization that participates. So in the program description, they say it can be, they list basically 20 different tasks that are included in this umbrella term of home and community-based care. So at least to my knowledge, there are no, it depends a lot on the organization. No.
Who normally run the NGOs?
So it depends. These NGOs, actually in South Africa, they use the term non-profit organizations, so NPOs. And there are different ones. There are some that are called, so non-profit organizations are actually the ones that are, let's say, most standardized or more regulated, and they're registered officially. And then there are CBOs, which are community-based organizations, and they're not necessarily registered as an organization. So then they don't have access, for example, to tax exemptions. And then there are faith-based organizations, which are usually run or supported by religious organizations. So there's a variety also within the public works program of, I just call them NGOs because, to make it a bit more simple. But there's also a variety of these NGOs within South Africa, so it depends a lot. Usually for NPOs, they do have a full, staffed board or someone, a director of that NPO, that has a fixed salary, but then they contract these volunteers or through the public, they are part of the public works program, the public works worker.
Okay, any other question? So, Charlotte, thank you very much, and thank you all for your presence. Okay.